Okay, again, I've been speaking without unmuting myself. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
I hope you don't see my notes though. Do you?
Yes, we do. We do.
Oh dear.
So, okay, just a moment.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem with WebEx. It'll show your entire screen. So it's better for you to just select the file.
Okay. Oh, right. That's a very good idea. Exactly. Okay, good. Now you see my, oh, good. You see my Acrobat Reader,
Yeah.
but you don't,
No,
you don't see my notes.
That's all we see. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, very good. I'll just stop sharing.
Should we start? Dr. Gopal, should we start? So good day to all and welcome back to the session on the Rāmāyaṇa in Tamil. Very happy to welcome Dr. Suganya Anandakrishnan of the University of Hamburg, whose primary work is on Tamil Bhakti poetry, especially Āḻvār poetry, as well as on medieval Sri Vaishnava writings in Manipravadam. Her research interests include Tamil epics and Purans, commentary traditions in India, Tamil-Sanskrit interactions, and the transmission of texts via manuscripts in South India. She will be reading from the Perumal Tirumoli of Kulaśekhara Āḻvār, which she has translated. Dr. Anandakrishnan.
Thank you, Niharika, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers for having me here, especially Sudha Chechi. It's a great honor to be part of this event. Today, I'm going to read out verses that deal with Rama and the Rāmāyaṇa in the Tamil Āḻvār poetry, especially of one Āḻvār, Kulaśekhara Āḻvār. The epic itself has been known to the Tamils since at least the beginning of the first millenniums or thereabouts, as there are a couple of references to it in the classical Tamil poetry. However, it won't be an exaggeration to claim that it was Kulaśekhara Āḻvār who made Rama a well-known figure in Tamil literature, perhaps even before Kamban, whose verses Professor David Schulman will be reading later, although Kamban definitely was more influential when it came to making Rāmāyaṇa so very well known in the Tamil land. Kulaśekhara is one of the 12 Āḻvārs who were Tamil Bhakti poets who lived approximately between the 6th and 9th centuries and who spearheaded the Bhakti movement in the subcontinent and beyond. And Kulaśekhara himself must have lived around the 9th century. He's often believed to have been a Chera king and the author of the famous Mukundamala as well, although both claims have been challenged. But I won't get into that. It's not very relevant to today's reading. Kulaśekhara's poetic corpus in Tamil, named Perumal Tirumoli by the latest Sri Vaishnava Acharyas, consists of 105 verses, divided into 10 decades of varying numbers, actually, of numbers of verses. And the last 3 of those 10 decades are dedicated to Rama, with the last one actually summarizing the whole Rāmāyaṇa in 10 verses, as some of our previous participants mentioned. So there are 33 verses out of 105, roughly 1/3 of the Perumal Tirumoli, which are reserved for Rama. And Kulaśekhara's poems are now part of what is known as the Nalayira Divya Prabandham, 4,000 divine compositions, part of the Sri Vaishnava canon. And the Sri Vaishnavas were the ones who gave this work the name Perumal, which refers to Rama in the Sri Vaishnava jargon, precisely because Rama is such an important figure in this Prabandha. Because although the other Āḻvārs have composed verses on Rama, no doubt, including earlier ones, or they even described episodes from the Rāmāyaṇa, mentioned them en passant, nobody has done it the way that Kulaśekhara did. And nobody seems to have borne that deep emotional affection and devotion for Rama that he did. Okay, let's start reading then the first of the 3 decades. The first one is actually a lullaby. And I think it's a good time to remember that often, at least in the Vaishnava Tamil corpus, it is Krishna's childhood that is celebrated in in detail. But here we have a lullaby for Rama, which shows Kulaśekhara's tender love for his favorite deity. And you will see that the word talelo is part of the refrain and is also the last word of each verse, but the last, which Talelo itself means lullaby, but it comes from the sound that is made with the tongue to make an infant sleep. And another interesting thing that you will notice when I read is that Kulaśekhara, like many Āḻvārs, links Rama to an Archa Murti in a temple. So he brings him and concretely ties him up to a temple that he can visit and see. And in this case of the first decade, it's the temple in Kannapuram, which is located on the east coast of Tamil Nadu. Okay, I'm just going to share not my screen, but my document now. Where is it? Where is the document? Sorry, just give me a second. Yeah, it's here. There you go. I hope you can see my document. Yeah. Right. So it's not moving to the next. There you go. So this is the first verse. The important thing to remember of this part is that the very first line mentions Rama's connection with Kausalya. It reminds one of the Ramayana verse, Kausalya Supraja Rama. And immediately in the next line, he mentions that he made Ravana's heads roll. And then one of the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas wonders, why? Like, why? From the birth, sudden leap towards the end of the Yuddhakanda. Why? Because the reason he was born was to kill Ravana. So that's why he just goes from his birth straight to Ravana's killing. Let me read out this verse. Mannupuhar Kausalaitan Manivayiru Vaitavane. தென்னிலங்கை கோன் முடிகள் சிந்து வித்தாய் செம்பொன் சேர் கண்ணினா நன்மாமதில் புடைசூழ் கணபுரத்தென் கருமணியே என்னுடைய இன்னமுதே இராகவனே தாலேலோ. This is chanted in the temples, in the houses, etc. by the Sri Vaishnavas in a certain way. I'll try my best just for this one. I haven't practiced enough this time. மன்னுபுகழ் கௌசலை தன் மணிவயிறு வாய்த்தவனே தென்னிலங்கை கோன் முடிகள் சிந்துவித்தாய் செம்பொன் சேர் கண்ணினன் மாமதிள் புடைசூழ் கணபுரத்தின் கருமணியே என்னுடைய இன்னமுதே இராகவனே தாலேலோ. So this talelo is this lullaby. So he's trying to get Rama to sleep. And then the next verse, again, he refers to Rama having created the whole earth. And then Rama who killed Tadaka. And then finally, Rama who's also the Lord of Kannapuram. So he links up the Lord, three different forms of the Lord. You probably know that among the Pancharatrins, the Sri Vaishnavas, but also among the others, you have 5 forms of Narayana. You have the Para form, the Supreme. You have the Vyuha form, which is Narayana's form in the milk ocean from where he creates, he maintains, he dissolves the world, etc. And then you have the Vibhava, which is the avatars. And then you have the Archa form, meaning the murtis you find in the temples at home, etc. And then finally you have the Antaryamin, the inner dweller. So here he links up the Vyuha Murti here, who created the earth, with the Vibhavavatara as Rama, who killed Tadaka, and then finally with the Lord in Kannapuram. For him, Rama is all three. Let me read this verse. Pundariha Malaradan Mel Puvaniyellam Padaitavane, Tintiralal Tadahaitan, Uramuruva Silai Valaitai, Kandavartam Manam Varangum Kanapuratten Karumaniye, Yendisayum Maludayai, Irahavane Talelo. So actually, unlike Krishna, says one of the commentators, Krishna grabs your heart, but Rama, no, you go to him, you give your heart to him. That's how he is. Oops, sorry. There you go. Okay, it doesn't want to move forward. Yeah. So, and the next verse shows the link between Rama. Again, Kausalya comes first. Kausalya is very important, the mother who gave him birth. And then again, he's the son of Dasharatha, he's the son-in-law of Janaka. So he has all these links with the people in this world. I'll just go faster with this decade. I think more interesting material appear in the next decades. Kongumali Karunkuralal Kausalaitan Kulamadalai, Tangupirum Puhachanakan Tirumaruha Dasarathi, Gangayilum Tirthamali Kanapurattan Karumaniye, Yangal Kulattinnamude Yiragavane Talelo. And some Vaishnava Acharyas say, he says Ingal Kulat, the nectar of our lineage. Probably we could take it as Kausalya speaking, but why would she speak of herself in the third person? It is actually Kulaśekhara himself speaking as a Kshatriya to another Kshatriya. The next verse, again, he created Brahma, and yet he made himself humble enough to become Dasharatha's son. And then, of course, Maithili's husband, which is one of his primary identities, because Narayana is identified by his Shriyapatitvam, as the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas say. Tamarai mel ayanavanai padaithavane, Dayaratantan Mamadalai, Maithilitan Manavala, Vandinangal Kamarangal Isaipadum Kanapurattan Karumaniye, Yemarubum Silaivalava, Iragavane Talelo. The next verse then. And here it's about brothers, Rama's brothers. On the one, the noble Bharata, upon whom he gives all his burden, because it is burden to rule, and his other younger brother who actually accompanied him. And if we have the time, I'll let you know how the Sri Vaishnavacharyas later on interpret these two different kinds of devotion, because Bharata does exactly what Rama tells him to do, even though he's not very happy about letting Rama go, whereas Lakshmana does what he thinks is best for Rama. Whether Rama tells him to stay back in Ayodhya or not, he doesn't worry about that. So one apparently is Paratantriya, like Bharata, and the other is Sheshatva, who does what he thinks is right, service, and more service. Paradum padar selvam Bharada nambike aruli, Ara anbu ilayavanodu arunkanam adaindavane, Siralum varai marba Tirukanna purattarase, Taralum nilmudi yendasarathi talelo. The next one, again, he left his kinsmen, although his kinsmen followed him behind. These are very good people. And the sign of a good person with Vairagya is somebody who gives up despite having good people around him. And yet, why did he leave all these people? So that he could help all these renouncers who already lived in the forest and needed his help and presence. சுற்றமெல்லாம் பின்தொடர தொல்கானம் அடைந்தவனே அற்றவர்கட் கருமருந்தே அயோத்தி நகர் கதிபதியே கற்றவர்கள் தாம் வாழும் கணபுரத்தின் கருமணியே சிற்றவைத்தன் சொல் கொண்ட ஸ்ரீராமா தாலேலோ. Okay, there's a mention to Kaikeyi here, Sitravai, the younger stepmother, but we'll get back to that later. Not back here, but in another decade. The next verse again mentions another form of Narayana, Vyuhamurti, when he lay on a banyan leaf. Again, it's the same person who killed Vali and then gave the kingdom to his younger brother. So I think Kulaśekhara focuses a lot on the younger brothers. Let's read this. Alinilai Palahanai Andrulaham Mundavane, Valiyai Kundru Arasilaya Vanarathu Kaditavane, Kalinmani Karayalaikum Karayalaikum Kanapurattin Karumaniye, Alinahar Kadipadiye Ayodhimane Talelo. Okay, the next one shows that for somebody who churned the wavy, there's some disturbance. I think somebody needs to mute themselves. For somebody who churned the wavy sea, how difficult could it have been to build a bridge across the sea? He did it. Malayadanal anai katti madil ilangai arittavane, அலைக்கடலை கடைந்து அமரர் அமுதருளி செய்தவனே கலைவலவர் தாம் வாழும் கணபுரத்தின் கருமணியே சிலைவலவா சேவகனே ஸ்ரீராமா தாலேலோ. I know I'm going fast because I want to get to the next decade. This one again, it's this is very interesting because, of course, he is there to support the lineage of Dasharatha, but also his main mission was to destroy Lanka and the king of Lanka. But also, again, he mentions again Rama is having grace for the younger brothers. So this is something very important for Kulaśekhara, as I mentioned earlier on. தலையவிழும் நறுங்குஞ்சி தயரதந்தன் குலமதலாய் வளையவுரு சிலையதனால் மதில் இலங்கை அழித்தவனே களைகழுநீர் மருங்கலரும் கணபுரத்தின் கருமணியே இளையவர்கட் கருளுடையாய் இராகவனே தாலேலோ. And then, very, very simple, oh, you who created the gods, asuras, and the directions, basically everything, as a Vyuhamurti, that very person is now lying in Srirangam. Why suddenly Srirangam leaving behind Kanapuram? He's not leaving Kanapuram behind, it's there, but that's, Kulaśekhara has a fascination for Srirangam. Tevarayum asurarayum disaigalayum padaithavane yavarum vandadivananga aranganagar tuyendravane kavirinal nadipayum kanapurattin karumaniye yevaribam silevalava ragavane talelo. And then this is the Phalashruti verse, but actually it's not quite a Phalashruti here, but let's read this. Kanninanma madil pudai sur kanapurattin kahuttan tannadimel talelo endruretha Tamil malai kulnavilum velvalavan pudai Kulaseharan sonna panniyanul pattum vallar pangaya bhattargale. It's more those who master all these 10 verses are devotees agreeable to him. Maybe we can interpret this as they become devotees agreeable to him. If we want this to be a Phalashruti. Okay, so this was the lullaby. And then let's move on to the next, which is known as Dasharatha's lament, Tayaradan Pulambal. It's also unusual, I think, having Dasharatha speak his extreme sorrow in the first person singular in poems. I mean, it's there in the Rāmāyaṇa versions, of course, apparently just before he passes away. I think this poem expresses powerful emotions and an unparalleled pathos. And in this poem, Dasharatha speaks to Rama, who has apparently already left to the forest, but also to Kaikeyi, whom he tells off, and even once addresses, I think, Sumantra and Vasishta. Please note all the rhetorical questions and the interjections which show the depth of his emotions and his despair. And also note that the Āḻvār in this case does not associate Rama with any temple or any other form but Rama, which maintains the poignancy of Dasharatha's words. One final word on this decade before we read it. This decade, I think, by Kulaśekhara most definitely influenced Kamban's passage, as far as this passage is concerned. Let's read this. So Dasharatha is very sarcastic towards himself, and he berates himself, as you will see here. He says, how well I have had you reign over the earth. And then, of course, another running theme is criticizing Kaikeyi. And here it's very interesting. He speaks of Kaikeyi as Kaikeyi who begot you, not the stepmother. Unai payanda Kaikeyi. What's gone wrong with her? What does she say in the next sentence? Go reach the vast forest. So the mother who gave him birth, perhaps more than Kausalya, she said, go to the forest, and he left. And you will also see that he uses different epithets for the forest. He can't stand that his son should go to the forest. It's dangerous, it's big. Once you enter, there are animals, you can't get out, it causes pain. You will see all this in the following verses. வந்தாளினை வணங்கி வளநகரம் தொழுதேத்த மன்னனாவான் நின்றாயை அரியணை மேல் இருந்தாயை நெடுங்கானம் படரப்போகு என்றாள் எம்மிராமாவோ உன்னை பயந்த கைகேசி தன் சொல் கேட்டு நன்றாக நானிலத்தை ஆழ்வித்தேன் நன் மகனே உன்னை நானே. So again, there is the motif also of Rama listening to the word, obeying, and it'll come back again and again in these verses. The next one, again, the despair. What shall I do? You have a rhetorical question here. He berates himself here. However did you walk? Emphasis in the right places, etc. He calls himself cruel-mouthed me. And then Rama abandons everything, but takes with him this very fine lady who probably didn't even know how to walk on the floor as it is. And also the prince, meaning Lakshmana, not just Rama. வெவ்வாயேன் வெவ்வுரை கேட்டு இருநிலத்தை வேண்டாதே விரைந்து வென்றி மைவாய களிரொழிந்து தேரொழிந்து மாவொழிந்து வனமே மேவி நெய்வாய வேல் நெடுங்கண் நேரிழையும் இளங்கோவும் பின்பு போக எவ்வாறு நடந்தனை என் ராமாவோ எம்பெருமான் என் செய்கேனே. So what shall I do? How could you walk? You've never walked this much. He did, Rama did, but Dasharatha in his love doesn't realize that Rama has walked before. But he will give details as to why it is difficult for Rama to walk in a minute. This one again, he speaks of Kausalya again, of a good lineage, of course, but murderous, spear-like eyes. Why? Probably because she's glaring at Dasharatha for what he just did. Also, some more self-berating. Me whose karman is powerful. It'll come back again and again. And then there's always this before and after. How Rama was so far. How is he going to cope in the forest? So he previously slept on soft beds, and now he's going to learn and sleep on a stone bed. And then again, he's going to sleep under the trees of the vast forest. So again, the images come. கொல்லணை வேல் வரி நெடுங்கண் கோசலைத்தன் புலமதலாய் புனிவில்லேந்தும் மல்லணைந்த வரைத்தோளா வல்வினையேன் மனமும் உருக்கும் வகையே கற்றாய் மெல்லணை மேல் முன்துயின்றாய் இன்று இனி போய் வியன்காணும் மரத்தின் நீழல் கல்லணை மேல் கண் துயில கற்றனையோ காகுத்தா கரிய கோவே. He may not be the king for everybody else, for the city, he is Dasharatha's king. Kariya kove, he says. The next one shows how Dasharatha wonders how he's going to live without Rama. He had this habit of asking Rama to walk towards him, and then he wanted to see the beauty of his back. As the Sri Vaishnavas say, Munnilum Pittaragiya Perumal. The beauty of his back is more graceful than the beauty of his front. So he would say, come, and then he would say, oh, go. And then he would say, come again, and then he would say, go back again. So he made him, cakewalk in a way. So, and then he can't understand how he's still alive. It's like this hard-hearted rock of a heart that I have that is not breaking into two. As you're walking into this forest, leaving behind the tame elephants, but going into where the very savage elephants wander. Of course, that's because Dasharatha has this very powerful, horrible karman. Va, pohu, va, innam vandoru kaal kandu po. மலராள் கூந்தல் வேபோலும் எழில் தோழி தன் பொருட்டா விடையோன் தன் வில்லை செற்றாய் மாப்போகு நெடுங்கானம் வல்வினையேன் மனமுறுக்கும் மகனே இன்று நீ போக என் நெஞ்சம் இருப்பிளவாய் போகாதே நிற்குமாறே. And it's not any random person who's afraid of going to the forest. He's a warrior. He even won over, he destroyed Parashurama's bow, as you can see it here, for Sita's sake. And where's the might here? He could have just destroyed Dasharatha's might and decided to remain king, but he didn't. Why didn't he? And then again, me, a great sinner. And then he describes with graphic details how horrible the forest is going to be on Rama. Rama is going to, his feet is going to bleed because the forest is so undesirable. The sun's heat is going to burn him. He's going to suffer from hunger. Why? Because this hardened sinner that Kaikeyi is, whom the king of Kekayas begot as a daughter. We had this discussion on Kekaya a few days ago. He was a good king, but not his wife. And apparently his daughter has taken after her mother, whom she never knew. பொருந்தார் கைவேல் நுதிப்போல் பரல்பாய மெல்லடிகள் குருதி சோர விரும்பாத கான் விரும்பி வெயிலுரைப்ப வெம்பசி நோய் கூற இன்று பெரும்பாவியேன் மகனே போகின்றாய் கேகையர்கோன் மகளாய் பெற்ற அரும்பாவி சொல் கேட்ட அருவினையேன் என் செய்கேன் அந்தோ யானே. Again, this despair, this inability to do anything, like what shall I do, what shall I do? He's bound by his word. There's nothing he can do, and he can't stop him, he can't allow him to go. So there you go. He's very much stuck, and it's Virumbada Khan. It's nobody desires this jungle, and yet he desires this jungle for the sake of his father's truthfulness. Okay, again, eye of an inferior character. And then he says, I still live. Like, how come I'm still alive? So, and then after the suffering that Rama, he thinks, will undergo in the forest, he thinks of his own suffering. How can he live without Rama calling him by his name, embracing him, being close to him, smelling the crown of his hair, not seeing Rama? So all the senses are involved. All of Dasharatha's senses are going to be starved without Rama's presence. And that's going to kill him. Without his senses, Rama he's going to die. That's what he's going to describe in the next verse also. அம்மா என்றுகந்தழைக்கும் ஆர்வ சொல் கேளாதே அணிசேர் மார்வம் என் மார்வத்திடை அழுந்த தழுவாதே முழுசாதே மோவாது உச்சி கைமாவின் நடையென்ன மெல்நடையும் கமலப்போல் முகமும் காணாது எம்மானை என் மகனை இழந்திட்ட இழுத்தகையே நிற்கின்றேனே. And again, why he doesn't understand. He speaks to Vasishtha and Sumantra. He doesn't understand why Rama should go to the forest. He's the one who should have gone to Vanaprastha, not Rama. He should have been king. He should have lived here to rule. That's not fair. And look at the changes. He wore scented, flower-bedecked tufts of hair. It's turned into tawny matted locks. And then he wore nice golden clothes, and they're turned into darbha grass. And the beauty of his limbs has changed. And here I must mention that the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas actually think that for us, people like you and me, the ornaments make us beautiful look better. For Rama, actually, no, they are there to hide his beauty. So in a way, when he wears darbha, he looks actually more handsome. That's why they say Kulaśekhara Āḻvār uses the epithets desirably beautiful darbha grass. பூமருவ நறுங்குஞ்சி புன்சடையாய் புனைந்து பூந்துகில் சேரல்குல் காமரெழில் விழலுடுத்து கலனணியாது அங்கங்கள் அழகு மாறி ஏமரு தோள் என் புதல்வன் யானென்று செலத்தக்க வனம் தான் சேர்தல் தூமரையீர் இது தகுவோ சுமந்திரனே வசிட்டனே சொல்லீர் நீரே. And then here he speaks to Kaikeyi, no nice words for her, obviously. She's basically ruined everybody else. And what did you get by doing that? You're living happily while you sent my son to the forest. And then also his younger brother, also the daughter-in-law. And then you've created blame for your own son. And then you are sending me to high heaven. You're living happily, he says. What have you, tell me, what have you gained from all this? பொன்பற்றார் எழில் வேத புதல்வனையும் தம்பியையும் பூவை போலும் மின்பற்றா நுண்மருங்குல் மெல்லியல் என் மருகியையும் வனத்தில் போக்கி நின்பற்றாம் நின் மகன் மேல் பழி விளைத்திட்டு என்னையும் நீழ்வானில் போக்க என் பெற்றாய் கைகேசி இருநிலத்தில் இனிதாக இருக்கின்றாயே. Fine, you are so happy. Good for you. And then, so again, this is the main idea that you took me and my promise to be the truth, and you didn't bother to look at anything else, how you yourself would suffer, how we struggled to beget you, how your mother would suffer. No, all mattered to you was my truthfulness. And then again, he says, I hope to be fortunate enough to beget you as my son in all the 7 births. The Sri Vaishnava Acharyas again say the test of a good child is asking their parents, would you like to have me as your child next birth? And some of the Acharyas say, usually they would say, no, thank you. And here you have, Rama was such a good son that Dasharatha wanted him again and again as his son. முன்னொரு நாள் மழுவாளி சிலை வாங்கி அவன் தவத்தை முற்றும் செற்றாய் உன்னையும் உன் அருமையையும் உன் மோயின் வருத்தமும் ஒன்றாக கொள்ளாது என்னையும் என் மெய்யுரையையும் மெய்யாக கொண்டு வனம் புக்க எந்தாய் நின்னையே மகனாக பெற பெறுவேன் ஏழ் பிறப்பும் நெடுந்தோள் வேந்தே. Of course, here he mentions the axe wielder again. Of course, that was also somebody who obeyed his father. But why did Rama not, like Rama of course also obeyed his father exactly like him, but the other Rama beheaded his mother in the process. Why couldn't this Rama behead this Kaikesi for once? One of the readings. Okay, so again he says, I'm going to heaven. So he's declaring his death. It's almost performative because his words end here. The next one is some sort of signature verse. So it's performative because he says this and then presumably he dies, and he's renouncing the wealthy city because Rama doesn't want to be in there. So he sees no point in staying where Rama cannot stay. And then one final word about the 2 women who ruined it for the other 2 very good women. The cruel woman, that is Kaikeyi, and then the crooked maidservant, Manthara, on the one hand, who ruined it for Sumitra and Kausalya, who are described very, very positively with long tresses, with flowers, and etc., who are extremely agreeable married due to these two women. Not all women are created equal, clearly. Tennahu malar kundal kausalayum sumittirayum sindai nova கூனுருவின் கொடும்தொழுத்தை சொல் கேட்ட கொடியவள் தன் சொல் கொண்டு இன்று கானகமே மிக விரும்பி நீ துறந்த வளநகரை துறந்து நானும் வானகமே மிக விரும்பி போகின்றேன் மனுக்குலத்தார் தங்கள் கோவே. So this is the signature verse. And what do you gain by reciting these 10 verses? You will not go down the evil path. Perhaps not like Kaikeyi did. Right? ஏறார்ந்த கரும் நெடுமால் இராமனாய் வனம் புக்க அதனுக்காற்றா தாரார்ந்த தடவரை தோள் தயரதன் தான் புலம்பிய அப்புலம்பல் தன்னை கூறார்ந்த வேல்வலவன் கோழியர் கோன் குடை குலசேகரன் சொல் செய்த சீரார்ந்த தமிழ்மறை இவை வல்லார் தீநெறிக்கண் செல்லார் தாமே. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here because my time is up, although there's a whole decade of the mini Ramayana here, but it'll be for another occasion, I think, hopefully. It's just, he summarizes the Ramayana. What he does is, he does indeed go up to the Uttarakanda, which is probably not very common. And he includes some, excludes some passages like Sita's fire ordeal, for example, or her banishment the second time over, and includes some very what is rather controversial nowadays, for example, the killing of Shambuka to recover the life of the Brahmin, etc. But that will definitely be for another day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly moving, and thank you for mediating the Sri Vaishnav reading so beautifully. It's a great honor to invite Professor David Schulman. He's René Lang Professor of Humanistic Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and acknowledged as one of the finest, foremost authorities on the cultures and language of South India. His needs no introduction. His work on the history of religion in the South India, poetics, Dravidian linguistics, and Carnatic music. Today, he'll be reading from the Rāmāyaṇa of Kamban, which he's translating for the Murti Classics Library of India.
Thank you, Niharika. Do you have the screen sharing on the screen? I'd like to be sure it's there.
Yeah. Just a moment. Sorry.
And maybe while you're looking for it, I'll try to say a few introductory words so we use the time well. I'll begin also by thanking the IIC and Sudha for the initiative, a beautiful initiative to spend a day listening to Ramayana samples in the various languages, and also the whole team that has been part of